3 men who had been sent to me from Caesarea arrived at the house where we were staying. The Spirit told me to go with them, even though they were Gentiles. These 6 brothers also went with me, and we entered that man's house. He reported to us how he had seen an angel standing in his house saying, "Send to Joppa and summon Simon, who is known as Peter. He will tell you and your entire household how you can be saved." When I began to speak, the Holy Spirit fell on him, just as the Spirit fell on us in the beginning. I remembered the Lord's words, "John will baptize with water, but you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit." If God gave them the same gift as he gave us who believed in the Lord Jesus Christ, then who am I? Can I stand in God's way? Once the apostles and other believers heard this, they calmed down. They praised God and concluded, "So then God has enabled Gentiles to change their hearts and lives so that they might have new life." This is the word of God to the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
This is one of those lessons taken from the life of the early church, where we encounter, there's so many layers to this. On the one hand, we have, the spread of the church. How did it get from Jerusalem to Joppa, to Antioch, to Alexandria, to Malta, to Rome, to us? Well, this account tells us. In the early church, one of the first controversies was who is included in the grace of God. Who gets to decide who is among God's elect? And who gets to decide the qualifications that we will accept? The 10th chapter of Acts has a longer explanation of what the 11th chapter repeats. But in essence, it comes down to this. Jesus of Nazareth was a Jew. All of his apostles, all of his disciples were Jews. That's it. We are, in a sense, Reformed Jews. Because that's the community that he emerged from, and that's the community that he worked within. So, the earliest controversy then was, if Jesus came first to us, and somebody else wants to come and be a follower of Jesus, how do we make sure that they have the right credentials? How do we make sure that they have all of their ducks in a row, their boxes checked? Well, you make them Jews first. Once you became a Jew, then you could follow Jesus. Seems logical. If Jesus was a Jew and he called other Jews to follow him, therefore, if you want to follow Jesus, you have to be a Jew. And so you get, Judaism had this sect called Christians. Well, the only problem with that is that's not what Jesus said. And that's not what he did. We know that he talked to and with and offered ministry among the Phoenicians, among Romans, among Greeks. We know that he reached out to those people from the other side of the river. We know this. The text tells us this. But like those first century Christians, we keep falling back into that trap of, yeah, but I know what God really meant. Or what he should have done. Oh, my friends, be careful. Peter was down on the coast in a city called Joppa. And you can go there today. He was in the house of a man named Simon the Tanner. Now, if you know anything about the ancient world, to be a tanner was a smelly job that none of us, not even Lynn Mosier would do, if he were here. That's how disgusting it was. It was smelly. It was dirty. And here is Peter, the one Jesus said, "You are the rock upon which I will build my church." Peter was hanging out in Simon's house. Right away, the flag should have been going off. Simon does something. Peter does something. And this is where we in the 21st century have to wrestle with. Because up to this point, everything that I've explained is just history. We know these things based on numerous other accounts. What happened to Peter? He had a vision. Now, those of us sophisticates of the 21st century, we hear people talking about visions, and right away, we look for the people with the white coats and butterfly nets. Visions? Come on. Really? Even if you've had one, and you're sitting out here this morning, chances are you have told no one. Because even in the church, which lives and breathes and dies on the word of the Holy Spirit, even us have a hard time with this idea of visions. But that's what's recorded. So what do we do with it? So, when you read the Bible, and I'm sure all of you read the Bible at least once a day, nod your head even if you're off. That's what I was doing. Oh, thank you. I was having one. I was having a vision, brother. We had this possibility of visions and dreams and insights into the will of God. The problem is, what do we do with it? Whenever you're reading the Bible, there's always these parallel tracks. A story is begun here, it's repeated there, or it happens to one person and then it happens to another person. The Bible is filled with these parallels. And we have one here. 10th chapter, parallel. Vision. They get to Jerusalem, they repeat it. Vision. So what do we do with this? Well, what have I been saying from the very beginning? Anytime the number 3 appears, what?
It's important. Pay attention.
Very good. 3 men are sent to find Peter. 3. 2 of them were servants. 1 was a devout soldier of the Roman legion, a loyal soldier under the authority of Cornelius, the centurion. So this wasn't just any random Gentile. This was one of those Gentiles. I mean, yeah, you know who I'm talking about. 3 men come. Because God spoke first to Cornelius. At the same time, God was speaking to Peter. Parallel. Let me send 3 to find this Peter. Okay? I've heard the call. I answered God's summons. So I'm going to send 6. 6 is good. Add Peter, you get 7. That's really good. So you have 3. It's important, pay attention. And then you have 7. Yeah.
Original calculator.
Yeah. It would be good for me to have 11. I take my shoes off. Peter, his 6 companions, witnesses of what had happened. The 3 sent by Cornelius. They go to Jerusalem. And there Peter is grilled by the leaders of the infant church. How dare you go into the house of a Gentile? Did they not remember what Jesus did? Did they not remember what he said? Apparently not. So Peter repeats chapter 10. Let me tell you what happened. And he lays it out. Not embellishing, just point by point by point. And this is one of those aha moments in the early church. When Peter gets to the part where he says, as I was sharing with them the good news of Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit came upon them. Yeah. If that doesn't bring a tear to your eye, I don't know what will.
Kira.
The Holy Spirit came upon these other people. The people from the wrong side of the river, the wrong side of the track, the wrong side of the aisle. And then it hit me. I remembered what Jesus said. I remember what happened to us on the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came upon us and changed the trajectory of human history. In that moment, I realized I am not going to stand in God's way. Who am I? Oh, I'm just Peter, the guy who's given the keys of hell and death. You know, the rock upon which the church is built. If even he wouldn't stand in God's way, is anyone here this morning willing to take that claim? I thought I saw Lisa's hand go up. The problem facing our society is that we keep coming up with new ways to tell God what God is thinking. Had an exchange with a friend that we used to go to their chapel in St. Maughan. The full name of the village is St. Maughan and Pidar. He used to preach at his chapel, his little Methodist chapel, in this little tiny village. He was taking me to task today because I had the nerve of saying, I really don't think as a man I have any business telling women what they can or cannot do with their bodies. That's just my stance. The United Methodist Church says this is a complicated issue. But it is first an issue for the woman. The same friend took me to task because I had the nerve of putting up a meme on my Facebook page in support of elder transgender people, which my sister is one. He said, it's very clear. God made man and women. Well, as Peter showed us, just because it was done doesn't mean God can't do a new thing. The reason I mention those two hot-button issues, and I realize right now some of you have already started your letters to the editor or trying to figure out how much tar someone my size would need. The reason I mention those, as important as they are in our time, in Peter's time, the idea of eating with Gentiles, eating with non-believers, was every bit as controversial. We now would think nothing. Well, I hope if somebody with a turban was walking down and sat next in the cafe and there's only one seat left and they offered it to you, that you would say, hey, I'm hungry, let's eat. That's the problem that the church has. We are so confident that we know the mind of God, that who should be included and who should be excluded, that we leave no room for God to do a new thing in us. Because if we open up ourselves to the possibility that God might have a vision for you, might have a plan or a purpose for your life that you had never dreamed of, if we say, I'm old, I'm fill in the category that you identify yourself or you've been identified. God can't use a bald man. God can't use an overweight woman. God can't use a person of color or a gay or a person who has done something or is something or looks like something. If we say all those things, we put all those caveats to God's grace, is there room in your life for God to do a new thing? If there is, if you want God to do something new in your life, at whatever stage of life you find yourself, if you're willing to say, here I am, Lord, send me. Be very careful before you say those words, because God just might take you up on it. Peter got sent to the house of a tanner. Then he got sent to the house of a centurion. Then he got hauled in front of the church council and had to give an account. The day would come when Peter would find himself being crucified in Rome. But he was crucified according to tradition, hanging upside down, because he knew that he wasn't good enough to die in the same manner that his Lord did. So I put it to you this morning. Is what God is asking of you enough? Are you ready for change? Change of heart, change of vocation, change of attitude. If you are, read the 10th and 11th